Oh, you can hear me. Interesting. Okay. I gotta make sure that the microphone does not feed through on that particular page. Because that's supposed to just be the holding screen. But I'm gonna go ahead and click on this and say, hello, everybody, and welcome to Rocket Lasso Live, Season 1, Episode 1. I am so excited to be here. I am so excited you are here joining me for the very beginning of this new adventure. Now, I got a bunch of things. First of all, a lot of these tech setups are pretty brand new. Big shout out to Mograph for helping me set up, giving me some advice for some different software and whatnot to hook these up. And there's some stuff going. I see my camera does a little twitch every once in a while. I've got to figure out exactly why that's going on. I got to remember to stay very centered on my microphone here. And everything seems to be working well. A week ago, we went and did a test run. So we're going to recap a little bit of that information from before. But then quickly, we're going to be getting into doing questions and popping open Cinema 4D and just diving right into it. So, okay, first couple setups. First of all, welcome to Rocket Lasso. It is my new company where we're going to be pursuing a bunch of learning and exploration and be very community focused and just do Cinema 4D and motion graphics and animation. And it's going to be similar to some of the live shows I've done in the past as far as the basic setup. But I hope to be able to. There's more things we can explore now, and even in my own time, when I make tutorials and do other things, where I can do more explorations for things like just straight up character animation or rigging and certain types of modeling that just weren't overly relevant to the specific world of motion design. So we got that. This blinking's a little annoying, but all this seems to be working well. I've got the chat up here, and it is going now. I guess another thing to mention is we are streaming to a couple of different platforms simultaneously. And look, I've got different setups here. I'm going to click on my cam and chat window so you can see the chat going and scrolling through here. So this should be live on Twitch and on YouTube and on Periscope and hopefully on Facebook. We tested out Facebook yesterday and it seemed to be working. So that is going to be cool. I've got a bunch of different camera setups and we're ready to rock on there. So with testing we had done, people were able to post links inside of YouTube and inside of Twitch, but Periscope it didn't work, and I just don't know how the Facebook one works at all. So I don't think links work from that one. So if you want to be participating and have me possibly click on one of the links of one of your questions, make sure you jump on over there to be able to actually ask those questions. So hey everybody, what's going on? Let's see. I'm going to pop up my chat in a big window here, and let's see who we've got hanging out. So we got oh man, you guys know I'm terrible at saying these names, but we got Lucien and we got Scott, of course. What's going on? Dan, Brograph is in the house, of course. G Rant, Shady, Sphere Factory. We got some old school people, some new people. Chris H, how's it going? September, Blemble, if that's how you say it, that's pretty cool. Token Anime, cool. Emiro, what's going on, everybody? Rockus, what's going on? Thanks for hanging out. iDesign, EJ's in the house. Man, we got Brograph in here. We got iDesign. We got 3D Duff. We got Luminetrix. Yada Glow. We've got so many people. Terry, there's some names that I'm so not going to be able to say that I am not attempting. We got Brian Fillmore. What's going on? Thanks for hanging out. Gary, we're not going to spend all day doing shout outs. I just want to have some time. So, for anybody who's new completely to this kind of live show format, what I'm going to be doing is answering questions. These can just be like some fun, straight up technical questions of like, how would you rig up a tail or something, things like that. Or if you have something cool that you've seen online, some cool, funky motion graphics piece or something that is really neat that you want to, try and break down, that we can try and do it. Then I'm going to need a link, and the link that you send me needs to be directly to the creator's work. I need to be able to see their name. I want to be able to give the person, the artist, or the company credit. And if it's a video, and this is very important, if it's a video, a Vimeo link or YouTube link or something, we can go ahead and check those out. But you have to call out the specific effect or the time code that you need. Otherwise, I'm not going to know what you're specifically asking about. Because a lot of, like, maybe there's a shoe commercial, but there's like 50 different things in that shoe commercial. I don't know which one you're talking about. And in that case, I'll just click on it and do something. I'll just click on it and pick whichever one seems fun to do. But I prefer that you call it the specific effect. Once again, sorry about the camera blinking. I'm not sure exactly what to do about that. It wasn't blinking this badly last time, but I changed some of the. I tried to crank up the frame rate to make it seem smoother and all that, and maybe that's causing some of the trouble. It was always blinking a little bit, but this is running off of my Sony A6000, so we'll see how that goes. But in any case, let's go ahead and start getting those questions going. And I'm going to share my screen here. Actually, let's do a whole screen here. And if at any point it's not working, I've got some people who are going to send me text messages and messages if it's not working, which I'm monitoring constantly. So first of all, if you haven't already gone to it, we've got a brand new website here. We got the rocketlasso.com. Important to note right off the bat that this is just a temporary landing page. There is work being done right now on the proper website, but I didn't want to wait forever. I wanted to be able to have something to get out there and start live streaming and start creating some stuff and not wait, everything. I mean, everybody here knows that, but when you're doing any kind of job or construction or contracting or anything, it always takes way longer than you think it's going to. So getting this out quickly so I could just begin and not wait 2 months for something more solid was really important to me. You'll see, of course, that we've got the Twitch stream just embedded right there. We got this countdown, which is already live because we've hit it. We've got a link down here to Patreon, and we will talk about that more towards the end of the stream. I don't want to be spamming a bunch of that. And then we've got the Rocket Lasso newsletter, which you should totally sign up for. I'm going to be using this very sparingly. It's kind of just there for big announcements, maybe if a really cool giant tutorial series comes out, or my hope is one day to be able to create some tools. So if you want to get the first word on that kind of stuff, make sure you're on the newsletter. I'm not going to be, there's no plans right now to do any kind of weekly emails or anything. So they're going to be really used really sparingly. And I guess just to throw it out there, you can also follow on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube or Twitter. Just getting the stuff off the ground, so there's not a lot of content in those, but be sure to follow those. In fact, be sure to click on the YouTube link and go and follow the channel, because I can't go and do certain functionality until after I've gotten 1,000 subscribers. And obviously, videos are going to start appearing on there as we go. In fact, I've got a list of quick tips I'm planning on recording very soon as well. So we've got that going on, and that is all good. And once again, start getting those links together. Just so everybody knows, when you start posting the links, I randomly click them. There's no particular order that I go in. Whatever name is there, whatever pops up and looks interesting is going to be the one that I click on. And don't spam. If I scroll way past it and I didn't answer yours, feel free to post it again. But don't spam it. Don't go clicking a whole bunch of times in there. If you spam it, then I will not answer the question, and we will probably kick you from the chat. So, having said that, let us go. Make sure anybody who's here right now, make sure you stick around more towards the end of the stream, because I'm going to get into more detail about some of the plans for the future of Rocket Lasso and some of the cool things we're doing and ways of supporting it, which is super important. Right now, doing these live streams is costing me money, so I'm not even breaking even on this right now. But in any case, I am ready to start things off properly. So just for like the official recording, I'm going to do a brand new intro right here. This was just kind of the private chat with you guys. So let's go ahead and do that. In fact, I'm going to click on the holding and then jump back on the screen and say hello again. So. Hello, everybody. This is Chris Schmidt with the first ever big official live show from Rocket Lasso, my brand new company where I'm going to be creating tutorials and more live streams and just more interaction, more community, more sharing, and hopefully one day in the future, more tools. So this is the first official episode. We have got a chat up. We're going to start going through there and looking at some different links. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and click on the chat one here. Now, unfortunately, it only starts from there, and I've got a different window I look at, but you're going to be able to see some of the chats coming in. And I'm going to start clicking on some of the links so that we can see what we're going to make here. So we've got a couple of links already popping up in the chat here, and everybody feel free to start putting more. Once again, real quick, the rules. I need to see the artist or company who made it. We have to give credit, or I am not going to do it. Otherwise, a question you ask has to be kind of so generic and abstract, where it's just like, hey, like an old question was like, how do you make a bale of hay? Like, that's nice and generic. It's not referencing somebody specifically, but we always have to give credit. So I'm going to go ahead and Victor, we're going to click on your Behance link right here. And actually, it looks like I'm going to have to copy and paste the links so that it doesn't pop into my non-default browser. So let's go ahead and drop this here and share the proper window. Let's go. This one? Okay, cool. So, what do we got here? Malaki or Maliki? Molasses. It looks like we've got some really cool paint strokes going on in here. So, man, this is a super advanced question right out of the gate, but let's see what we can do. We've got new tools now. We've got R20, so we might be able to do more than we were able to do in the past. So, man, these boxes are really cool. My assumption here is going to be that the question here is this crazy paint strokes, not only the paint strokes, but you've got liquids and all that. Let's see if they called out these very, very specific questions. So once again, if you're going to link to a video, make sure you pass me the effect that you're looking for. But yeah, I think the specific part is just kind of this smearing and melting of paint. Now, as far as getting these nice colors mixed up, that is seemingly pretty dang advanced. But, so I don't know if we're going to go that deep. And this is actually a fun question, so we will tackle this for a little while. And I don't know if there's a bunch of sound going through there, so we're going to go ahead and make that real quiet and mute. So there is definite possibilities that we could do that with X particles and get really cool colors going on in there. In fact, I know for sure that there are ways to do that. It's not something I am directly familiar with. And let's see who the owners of this are. We got a bunch of cool names here. So these are the people who made this piece, and man, it's really cool looking. So let's go ahead and start tinkering around and see if we can get something. And I think we're going to focus a little bit on here on the using some volumes in R20. So we've already got Cinema 4D here, and let's go ahead and try and start this one off properly. Now, let's think about this for a little bit. There's a bunch of different elements here. First of all, we could just do some particle stuff, but that would be doing some full-on, theoretically, X-particle particle simulations where everything's kind of fluid and blobby and clumping. That would be the proper way to do it. But if I were to try and pursue that kind of rig, we'd probably go and I would go and spend like 8 hours of just research and development, just tinkering, playing. It's like, okay, I've got a very simple fluid simulation going here. Cool. Now let's think about streaks. Now let's think about actually getting the colors on there. Let's think about spreading it out. Let's think about each of those becomes a separate thing to pursue. So those are not trivial things. So making this up as we go is going to end up being a little bit more challenging, of course. So going back, let's actually look at those blobs again real quick. Maybe we can pause right here. So you see we can get like a blob here, and it gets spread over and it's going to start diminishing. There's a lot of different elements there that we could be concerning ourselves with. Like, first of all, we got color and rendering and shading. I think I'm mostly going to worry about the creation of models here. And once again, we are not going to pursue the X particle method, even though I'm certain you could do it. And we do have X particles here. So the first thought is, and you guys are probably at least vaguely familiar with some of the new features in R20. So we've got things like, let's go ahead and I guess I'll create a sphere. We'll start out with a spherical blob. I'm going to hit NB as a shortcut so we can see all of our polygons. I always like seeing the polygon count. I'm going to turn to triangles just because they deform better. And just because we're on a live show, why don't we go ahead and make this pretty low poly? I think that will work pretty well. And I'm trying to think, I am tempted to still do some X particles, even if our basis is not, because I'm going to make a floor here, and then we could go and add a simulation rigid body on the floor, right click on the sphere, and we'll add a simulation soft body. So if we were just to play right now, we're going to see a kind of a bouncing ball fall to the ground. That's all well and good. Let's go ahead and make a white material just so this pops off the background a little bit better. So that is a fine start to that, but I would want something very blobby, something very melty out of our sphere here. So let's go ahead to our dynamics tag, our soft body tag on the sphere, and we are going to click on the soft body tag, and we're going to look at some of these settings. There are a bunch of different settings here, and you change different ones depending on what you want to do. Structural is going to be how much, you see these edges, like at one single edge. That edge is a certain length, and what structural does is it tries to keep that length the same. So I think it's okay if that is actually a little looser. Let's go ahead and drop that down to 20%. So that's a smaller amount there. And then we've got shear, and shear is how much it can like twist sideways. It's kind of like if you imagine a shear. Well, I mean, there's the shear deformer. This one is it. Yeah, the shear deformer. So imagine if a polygon was tilting like that. So that's what that control does. And you have flexion, which is the ability for it to like fold over like a flap. So I think we want all of these to be relatively low. We're going to go 10 and 10 on each of those. And now when we hit play, let's go ahead and start again. Okay, you see it's actually still maintaining its shape pretty well, so we're going to continue to weaken these. The other thing that we also have is our damping. So by dropping our damping down to 1% on each of these, I think we'll see significant difference there too. You see there's a lot more energy maintained. We might not want to keep that, but that is another interesting addition. So I really want this thing to like flop over. So we're going to keep on weakening this. There we go. So okay, I had to go as low as 1% to start getting this down a little bit more. It's actually quite bouncy, so the damping was not something we want to drop down too far. Like I want to, yeah, there we go. In fact, we can go pretty high with this. Like it should not be bouncy. It should be very melty. So I'm going to go ahead and just for fun, let's put shear down to 0 and flexion down to 0. I think if we go too far, yeah, it's just going to completely fold in on itself. And actually, look at that. By itself, by dropping our flexion down to 0, it's able to fold and fold and fold. And we actually kind of got a cool little folding effect there. And always keep in mind, if we let that fold down a little bit, if I were to give ourselves a little bit more time, let's jump it up to 100. Actually, I jumped up to 1,500, but that's fine. If we were to, I'm just going to manually do this, add in some pressure. So I'm going to add in 10, well, that might be a little much. Let's say 4 pressure and hit play. It's now going to reinflate, so it's almost like an unfolding effect. That is not what we're worried about right now. But let's go ahead and continue making this thing a little more blobby. We're working on something very low poly here, and in fact, we still need some percentage here. So I'm going to say 0.1. Going on these tiny small numbers, yeah, even 0.1, you see it's really holding the shape. Now, when we're on this very low poly object, the properties of these springs, which are the connections between each of the polygons and the points, will dramatically change depending on our poly count. So if I were to go here and just jump this up to the next series of polygons, I imagine we'll see something decently differently. You see, yeah, look how much more that melted down because there's more polygons to do it. So keep that in mind as well. So I'm going to jump up to those higher sides. Obviously, we're low enough poly where that is doing a fine job for us. I'm going to go back to 1%. And oh, there we go. I really like the way that looks. So we got a nice little splat, and then all the energy is drained out, and it's working really well. Okay, so that's a fine start. Now, let's go ahead and see if we can kind of smush this a little bit just for fun. I'm going to go ahead and create a cube, and this is just going to be our smusher here. And I'm going to lower it to about here on the ground, and let's go ahead and add a collider body. Now, we should be able to steal the collider body tag from the floor. And let's just click on it, make sure, where if we click on dynamics, you'll see it's dynamic off, which means this is a dynamic object, but it's not dynamic. It's not running the simulation on itself. So we have a dynamic body. All that means is if I play, it's dynamic, but it's not doing anything by itself. And actually, you know what? When we're doing these kind of soft bodies, things can explode and we can freeze up. So why don't we go ahead and save this right away? So let's just go ahead and say save. I'm going to jump up into episodes, episode 1. Scene files, and let's go ahead and just call this paint. Let's just do number 1 paint. Cool. Okay, so now with that saved, if we hit play, my hope is that we can take this and slowly smear it over there. And you see we're kind of getting it to slide across. Now it's not behaving very sticky, and it just kind of fell apart. So we might actually need it to maintain its shape a little bit better. And maybe even put a little bit of randomness around it. But I don't want to get stuck in any particular detail because this is a complex question and it's a complex rig. And if we spend too long on any one part, we're not going to get anything done. But along those lines, let's go ahead and maybe put, you know what, let's put a little bit of pressure on it. Let's hit play. I just want to see what a little bit of pressure does because 11 should almost maintain its original shape. We don't want that much. But yeah, doing that, volume conservation actually would probably be pretty good too. So let's give that a size of 10. So it's always trying to maintain that shape. So the hope here being is if we were to take this and smear it across, oops, it's very slidey. So why don't we go ahead and crank up the friction on both the floor. Actually, let's crank the friction up on everything. And I'm always curious about when you're using soft bodies, how much difference this makes. I'm going to say no bounce, 100, let's just do 100% friction. And now you've done that, I'm just curious about how well. Oh yeah, you see, actually that's doing a really good job. So now you see it's going to grip the floor, and now it's a little more destructive as I'm pushing it through. It's kind of rolling and maintaining that shape. So once again, it's still a little spherical and blobby. What I might do to counter that would be crank up our gravity. So if I were to hit Control or Command D, then we can go to our we can go to project settings, which then we can click on dynamics. Then we can go to general, and we've got gravity. So let's just try making the gravity 10 times as strong, and bloop, instantly you see it's going to plop down. Let's try doing half that amount, and I like that already. It's just another force that we can play around with here. It blobs really nicely there, and now let's see if we were to smear it. Look, you see we get this little thing pushing up in the front, but hopefully when we roll away from it, it's still pretty flat. That's actually pretty good. I'm actually quite happy with that. So let's give this a quick save, and I'm going to begin a new save file in case we have to go back to that point if I mess something up. So that is a fun basic start right there. Now, what my thought is we could, as we smear it along, we could have a bunch of particle trails generating off of every single one of the lines. Now, the tricky part here is that, I'm going to make my picture a little smaller here. I don't want to eat up too much of the hierarchy up there. Okay, so I want every single point on this object to be emitting points. And I want those points to then fall down onto the ground. Now, the problem is that the basic simulation setups inside of Cinema 4D, the basic emitter, will not be able to do that. I can't tell it to emit from every point. Now, we could make a couple of tiny emitters and then do it from each of them, but that might be going a little bit too far. And then we could, of course, the old school thinking particles, we could do it. But the best way would probably be X particles. And I think what we're doing here is a relatively straightforward setup. It's going to be hard to know for sure. But let's just start it. I think now we're not worried about the liquid part of it too much. So this is not an advanced use of thinking particles. So let's go ahead and create an emitter. And you guys know I always create these things from scratch. I never use a structure, even though I probably should. But let's go ahead and see if we can get this going. I'm going to, in the emitter, I want to change the emitter shape to an object. And the object is going to be our dynamic sphere. And I want it to emit from, honestly, it could just be anywhere. It could just emit from the surface if we're doing this, depending on the way we're doing this. So it would be polygon area would be the surface, the way Cinema would usually refer to these things. And that should actually work fine. So now you can see that there's just particles getting kind of emitted everywhere. Now, obviously, we don't want these flying away, so let's go to emission, and I'm going to give them a speed of 0. And let's go ahead and actually visibly make these bigger so you guys can see them better on the stream. Let's go to display, and I don't want dots. I like box. Box is pretty good. So now we are emitting these boxes. So that is fine. We're constantly emitting a couple of particles. And it does indeed follow the dynamics, which is not something I was certain it would do, but it does, so cool. Now, why don't we go ahead and keyframe a quick little animation here so that I don't have to manually run this cube over it and smear it every time. So we'll give it a few frames. Actually, we can start right from the beginning. I'm going to go to position. Let's go ahead and record all the positions, hit play, let that blob over. And now we're going to see if we drag it across. It does indeed intersect, so we're just going to drag it all the way. I don't want to go too fast, though. Let's give it some more time. So we're going to drag this all the way over to here. And then we just have to hit play on it and make sure that that's looking okay. So we go, brrr. Okay, that was pretty good. We might be able to go a little bit lower. I'm going to actually delete my Y, and I can just scoot this down. What I just did is I deleted, oh, let me actually talk through that because that's kind of cool. If you hold down, you can, of course, create a keyframe just by clicking one of the dots. That works fine. And then if you were to click again, you'll re-record the keyframe. But if you hold down Control or Command and Shift at the same time, you'll actually, and you click on the dot, you'll not only delete that keyframe, you'll delete all the keyframes and the track. So I completely erased everything involved on Y. So now there's only X and Z, which means I'm free to move my Y anywhere I want to, which is what I just did. So let's go ahead and play and drag this across. It looks like I accidentally went higher than lower. So we're going to lower that way down, hit play. Smear. Okay, that's pretty good. So we'll let that happen, and then we'll actually hold on this position for a second. And I'll just record on X and Z. And actually, at this point, I'll have moved my cube over to here. And we'll record again. And I'll hit play, let a little more time pass, not too long. And then, actually, this is how long it's going to take to smear across. So we'll then immediately move this over here. And record again. And let's see. Smear and then smush. It's Just going to give it a little second there to settle, and then we'll smush it again. Okay, cool. Okay, well, there's a couple things to keep in mind here. It depends on how we want the rig to go. Now, we're just emitting the particles right now. Let's just do this step by step. First of all, let's go ahead and add a X particles gravity in here. So we're going to add in some X particle modifier motion, and we want to add in some gravity. So now the particles should fall, but they won't acknowledge this floor, so they'll just be falling right through. Now, I don't actually think you can make a floor a X particles collider object, but let's find out. I'm going to say XP collider, and let's just see if it does collide. I don't think it will. It does not, but that's simple. We just make a plain T for scale, scale it up, put our collider on there. In fact, why don't we just go ahead and make that our... Actually, I do like the dynamic floor. Like, soft body, the way Cinema calculates is something cannot get through that floor. The soft body cannot, but it might try and escape through the plane. So we'll actually leave the floor here. We'll just make it invisible. We'll turn off the stoplight there. And now, with any luck, our particles will be falling to the ground, and they'll just be sitting right there on the ground. Cool. So that is working well. Now, one of my thoughts is I'd kind of like to be getting streaks off of here. So what that makes me think is we shouldn't be emitting from the entire surface. We should be emitting from the actual points. So polygon centers or points are essentially equivalent in this situation. So let's go ahead and say the points. And the idea here is stick particle source. No, one particle per source element. So is that going to automatically make it so that every single point is emitting a particle every single frame? So that is indeed what I want to do here. Now, it might be too many particles, and we can potentially slow it down. But what I would love to have happen is, actually already there's some streakiness there. But what I would love to have happen is, let's create a generator, a next particle generator XP trail. And this XP trail is going to be... I think it's already, yeah, because I had the emitter selected, it's automatically fed in, and the algorithm is the connections. So we could do, I just want to do different setups here, because what I really want to do is have it be, if we do straight sequence, yeah, we can't do straight sequence because it's not per polygon group. And honestly, I'm not even sure if I'll be able to do this. So we got clusters, tendrils. No, it's not tendrils. Yeah, it's just... This is the part I was slightly worried about is I want each point to just connect to its next point, but I would think that'd be multiple sequences, but that is not what we're getting here. How many points? There's a small chance that this multi-sequence might work. Sequential length. Oh, this is the length. That's also not what I want. How could I do this? There's probably somebody in the chat who would have a really good idea here. So what I want is every single one of these to be connected to its neighbor, like just to be connect. Now we could say nearest, and that would maybe, let's see, nearest by index, nearest by distance. Like nearest by distance could do something. And I could say, this is dangerous actually. I'm going to hit save. Changing distance mode, I'm going to say all within distance. Actually, I'll say max number within distance. That's a little safer. But you'll see, yeah, these are making connections. Now, I'm going to say the max distance has to be pretty dang small. So, yeah, we're going to start getting these kind of little tendrily things. It's not quite what I want. The max number of connections, really, I want that to be pretty low. And then if we were to make our actual particles invisible, what I would want to see is these little individual like strings coming off of there. Oh man, I feel like it's just barely nearest neighbor. Somebody's saying do nearest, well, there is no nearest neighbors. There's nearest by index and nearest by distance, so that's essentially the neighbor. So I feel like I'm missing something here, but I don't want to get like stopped right here on some basic little thing like this. This might be doing a good enough job. What really this is just about the tracer object tracing onto the object, but then I want the particles to fall down onto the ground is what I really want to have happen. Yeah, a lot of people are. I mean, some of these. I don't understand what people are saying with the connect object. I think that's a separate conversation. Um, but that's, I mean, it's working pretty well in general. And well, like I said, I do not want to get stumped on this bit. Now, we could ignore this trail for a little bit. In fact, why don't we go ahead and turn off that trail? I'm going to go ahead and turn on our XP emitter, and let's go ahead and take a look at some volume stuff and just see if we're getting anything interesting here. So we're going to start by creating a volume builder, and we're going to drag in the objects we want. So I'm going to drag in a sphere, and let's hide it, and hopefully the dynamics acknowledge on there, but let's do it from the time of 0. So yes, that's doing a fine job of acknowledging it. So that is, if you guys are not familiar with R20, then this is going to be important. Actually, if you'll take a look at that, it is not returning the final dynamic object. It is returning that as a center point, which is interesting. So the first thing I'm going to do is potentially make it editable, but I'd prefer to not make it editable. I'd prefer to put into a connect object. And in the volume builder, let's try feeding it a connect object instead. And let's see if that will acknowledge the new shape. It is unfortunately not. We're going to try changing it to fog mode and see if that changes anything. It, once again, does not seem to, which is a little unfortunate. There's a possibility that this is going to force me to bake it in order for us to see it. As a test, why don't we go ahead and make it editable? We'll hit undo because I don't want to lose it. So I'm going to make it editable, and let's feed that directly in here, and let's see if that does work. And we'll go back to signed distance. Hit play. Oh, now it does work. So unfortunately, it's forcing us to make it editable. So I'm going to hit undo, and then we'll make a copy of the sphere so we can always go back to the parametric one if need be. But I don't actually think we'll need to. So now we'll go back here. We're going to feed in the sphere. We'll put sign distance field, and now we're actually seeing the blob happen. Blurb. Well, I'm slightly confused right now, actually. Didn't we just feed this in a second ago, and it seemed to play back really smoothly? And now it's like slowing down a lot. What did I do something that would change that? That's strange. Well, anyway, let's continue on. Now when this comes through, we should see it's going to do a fine job smushing it. It's looking pretty good. And now the thought is we're going to feed in these particles as well. Now, if we were to feed in this XP emitter right away, you're going to see nothing is going to happen. Nothing is going to happen here. We need it to get acknowledged somehow. So how are we going to acknowledge it? Well, we could put it into the trails, and then the trails would feed through. But what I'm going to do is a very simple thing. In the XP emitter, we can go into, is it editing? Yeah, under editing, we can say, I want points editable. So what that means is it's actually outputting a bunch of points as if it was a Cinema 4D object. So like imagine if you had a cube and you deleted all the polygons, but the points were left over. That is essentially what this is doing. So every particle is now feeding to Cinema as a point, but the builder can now see those points. So if I drag that in, let's go ahead and let this roll. So you can see we are actually leaving some of these little things behind. So that's actually pretty good. I'm going to hide our emitter because we don't need to see that. We just need to see these combinations. And let's go ahead and create our volume mesher. If we feed a volume builder into a volume mesher, we're going to see what the final mesh looks like. Now we're going to see that there's not much right here. We got a couple little extra streaky thing or little dots here, but this is just telling me that we don't have quite enough resolution for it to see. So in the builder, we're going to click on the emitter, and we are going to say, I guess we're going to say use mesh points. Oh, okay. Instantly turning on use mesh points is acknowledging this emitter way better. And there are, now we have a radius that we can control. So I can increase or decrease this radius. So, you know what? I actually do want it to be pretty small, I think. We don't want too much extra. Now, I'm already right away seeing one small problem, and that is, yeah, we're going to leave this little, there's these little lumps that are happening here because we actually need these particles not to emit to the outside, but probably the inside. Otherwise, it's going to be creating these little bumps. But we are leaving a nice little streak here. Now you'll see that this is the way our streak looks, but if I make this radius any smaller, eventually it's just going to, and I'm not even going that small, but eventually I think it's just going to boop, disappear. Like the threshold isn't enough to see it. And the reason that happened is you'll see that our mesh point radius shrank below our voxel size. So the voxel size is like the master control here. Let's go ahead and turn on, we're going to make it half the size, but keep in mind when you change a voxel size, it's not, I made the number half the size, but that's way more than twice as much detail. Actually, that's not true. Visually, to us, it's about twice as much detail. But calculation-wise, I'm scaling it down on X and Y and Z all simultaneously. And with all three of those changing simultaneously, that means we've created the amount that we had times 2 times 2 times 2 in the amount of detail by cutting this number in half. So keep that in mind. But now we've got a lot more resolution there. And because we have more resolution, we can continue to shrink this down further. And now you can see we're going to get a little bit more of these little individual streaks, which is closer to what I was hoping for. Now, in addition to that, we can also do something like create a smoothing layer. Now, smoothing layer is going to completely obliterate some of our stuff unless we use a very light touch on it. And in fact, it's doing an okay job using a light touch, just a little bit of rounding on there. But we could also just grab that and let's make this a little bit bigger. So jump it up to 7, and now we can smooth it a little bit more. Now we have different algorithms for smoothing, and I do find that this smoothing layer one, even though it looks the best, it slows it down quite a bit. Now we're actually getting pretty reasonable playback still, so I'm not upset about that. But let's see what happens now. If we streak this through, that's doing a pretty good job. And yeah, I'm quite happy with that trail, actually. That's not bad. So why don't we continue? This is a fine start there. Now, once again, actually, you saw how slow that playback was. Let's go ahead and turn off that smoothing layer and see what our playback looks like and just see. Yeah, look how much frame rate we're losing. So that's something that we're going to want to turn on maybe at render time, but not in the middle here. Now, a couple things we want to do. Right now, we see these little dark particles are falling quite slowly. Given the effect that we're doing, I don't even know. Honestly, I don't think that we don't want all of these particles emitting. We only want particles emitting if they're very near the ground. It's almost like they only get left behind if they were down below. So I wonder if we can set up some sort of rule in our emitter to make that happen. So let's go ahead and temporarily turn off the builder, and let's turn on our emitter, and let's see our sphere. So we're kind of, well, actually, we don't need to see the sphere right now. Actually, you know what I like doing? Let's go ahead and make the sphere visible in our viewport. But I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to add a Cinema 4D display tag. Let's turn that on, and I'm going to change it to line mode. So now you see that we have our sphere there, and we can see it. It's not going to render because we have that stoplight off, but we can still kind of see it represented without it blocking our view of particles. Cool. So that's just a little standalone thing there. And if we wanted to change the way that looks too, we could even go into the color, and I can say turn it on, and now it's a white circle, so we can see that a little bit better as well. So actually, we're making pretty good progress here. I'm going to rewind all the way, and let's hit save real quick. So we'll save as number 3. Okay, so let's go ahead and hit play. So, well, okay, so here's one of my thoughts. All these things are emitting particles, but really, we only want particles to be emitted if they're essentially touching the ground. The top of the paint is not streaking on the ground, only the bottom of the paint is. So let's see if we can, because we're on a flat surface here, we might be able to make a pretty simple rule here. I'm not sure, but let's go ahead and go to questions. So if you guys haven't used questions in X particles, it's one of the things that makes it super powerful, but it's a little obtuse. It can be a little tricky, but let's go ahead and add a question. So I'm going to say, here's a question. And the question is going to be particle age. Do I want that? No, actually, I do want particle data potentially, but it's more about its position. So scale rotation, no. So none of that is what I want. Particle position, there we go. Particle position, particle distance traveled, illumination, nearest particle radius. Do we not have? We could do an inside volume. And that would actually be fine, but I'm surprised I'm not. And here's the thing: this could exist. What I'm looking for is just like I want to get the Y position of the particle, and that would be trivial to do in thinking particles. But here in X particles, I'm not seeing a way of getting. Oh, here's particle position. There it is. Okay, particle position. Like I said, it probably was there. So we have particle position, and here's Y. Now we know the floor is 0, so I'm going to say if the Y position is less than well, actually, this is tricky because you see this emitter is just emitting particles all the time. So let's go ahead and make a slightly more complex rig. This will be fun. This will be fun. Actually, we're going to start that over. I don't want to lose anybody because this is going pretty well. This emitter right now is emitting particles all the time. You see, we're constantly emitting particles all the time. I don't want that anymore. What I want to do is instead have this thing just be an emission of particles one time, and then I want them to stick to the original object. So I'm going to say I want you to stick to the original source object. So what should happen here is as the particles are emitting, you see they're actually stuck to the surface. Now, what I don't know is this still emitting particles every single frame? Like, is there a million polygons on top of this object? And I don't want that. So what we're going to do is change our emission to be not a rate. I don't want a constant rate. I want a shot, a single shot of particles, and it's going to be per frame. I'm going to say, and it's only going to last a single frame. So, and then you see we have a bunch of particles. So the idea here should be is that, boom, there's a single shot of particles, frame one, and they never get emitted again. Cool. And you see they're stuck to the surface. Everything's working great. Cool. So now we can go to our questions, and I'm going to add a question. And the question is going to be, I want some information about the particle position. What do I want? I want the particle position again. And now we can get, based on the world space, so it's not relative, it's absolute, the axis of y, if it is less than, I'm not sure of our scale, but I'm going to just say 10. If it's less than 10, then it's allowed to do something. What is it allowed to do? Well, what it's going to be allowed to do is add an action. And that action is going to be a direct action. I always get a little direct action control modifier action. I need to find my emit particles one, and I always lose that. Is there an easier way to get that? I don't want to get lost here. Create, add action, sub question. That seems to be what I want. Yeah, give me a second. I just gotta noodle my way through here and find like the control emitter. I'm not even remembering exactly what it's called. So I have to just go through them. I thought it was a direct action. Control spawning. That's why I want to control spawning. So it's going to control the spawning of a different emitter. I'm going to just create a new emitter by saying add spawning emitter. So our question is constantly checking this emitter, and now it will control the spawning, and that controlled spawning will control things off of this emitter. So now based off of this emitter, if the condition was true, it's going to emit particles. We have to do a lot of the settings through the control spawning here. So through the control spawning action, we're going to go and it's going to spawn from the particle source a random position offset. We actually don't need a random offset. I'm fine with it being directly on there. The speed is absolute, and the number of particles to spawn is 1. And it can only, no, I don't want to spawn it. I don't want to kill the particle. I just want it to be doing it all the time. So, okay, it's emitting one particle, but this might emit a single particle one time. Yeah, it seemed to emit one particle one time, and then they're just doing their thing sliding around. So we actually have to go into the emitter now, and let's just go ahead and give this a quick name. We're going to call this, we'll just call it trail. So those are the trail particles. Let's go ahead and make it easier to see. We're going to change the color to yellow, and let's go ahead. Oh, that's the icon color. Let's go ahead and make the actual particle yellow, and I'll also make it box because they should be visually fine. And now we go to emission, and right now it's controlled only. So actually, that's a good point. Right now it's controlled only, so it's been controlled by the controls. But what we're going to do is we're going to go back into our original emitter, and let's even rename this one emitter dot stick to sphere. So with this emitter, I'm going to go back to the questions, and you see that the question is being asked one time. Test and pass once. I don't want it to be tested and passed once. I want it to be checking it again and again and again every single frame. Let's delete it from the original position and do that. So now it's testing again and again and again. So whenever this condition is true, it is now emitting particles. And if we go to the side here, you'll see that we're generating particles, but only from the ones that are below 10. That's working great. So we actually don't want these moving. So we're going to go ahead and go to our new emitter, and let's go back to emission. We're going to give it a speed of 0. And now the gravity should still take over these particles, and they should still fall to the ground, even if they're not quite at 10. But now they're only spawning if they're right there on the ground. And look at that. That is working pretty dang well. Now let me see what we've got. Now actually, let me double check something because you'll see how when this got hit, those rolled, but you see how why is it? Oh, okay, interesting. I guess an unintended consequence is the unintended consequence here is that this isn't a constant trail because when it's touching the ground and it's sliding, then it's going to slide, but then it rolls over the top and it gets up too far above Y, so then it doesn't fall down to the ground. So that's a little bit of an unintended consequence. I'm actually not sure how to get around that if I was worried about it. It would make it so this entire little extra emitter we made is a little bit pointless. Think. You know, what's funny is I just thought of an almost completely different non-X particle way to do this. But I'm starting to think that it might be good to emit from these particles all the time. It doesn't have to be under one. Like the question should just be all the time. So just for an example, I'm just gonna raise the distance all the way so it's constantly emitting particles all the time. And now we're going to say that the controlled emission source particle, the direction should be based on the, let's say based on the particle direction. And let's make sure that these particles are sticking to the normals. So yeah, the particle direction is the normal of the point. So that should be fine. And we need to be able to visibly see this by giving these other particles a little bit of speed or at least an offset. So actually an offset's a good way of visually seeing it. So random position offset. I don't want a random position offset, but I do want an offset. Can we do that? Spawn particle speed, no. No. Maybe in the emitter, but I'm starting to think not. Origin offset? Oh, maybe an origin offset. I'm not sure. This might be too much or too little for us to visibly see. We're going to have to let this go for a few frames so we can see it. Okay, actually, oh, it is interesting. So it is offsetting, but it's not, doesn't seem to be based off of a normal. It's just facing the direction. So in order to see this clearly, we're going to have to probably change this original emitter to not emit from the points, but to emit from a polygon center. And now it should distinctly have a normal to be referencing, is a hope here. So now let's see if there's some orientation here. No, actually, well, actually, that's, now that I think about it, this isn't necessarily wrong. These might be emitting from the normal, but then gravity's pulling them straight down. So that's actually not necessarily a problem. Actually, here's the way we can tell. Is if we go to the emitter and we give it some speed. So if we give this a decent amount of speed, then we should see these shooting off in angles. No, but they're still shooting up and down, which is implying that it's not actually facing the normal. Yeah, that's interesting. Relative to the source particle direction. It's referencing the source particle. It's relative to the source particle direction. So this goes back to the original one. Is this not facing the normal? Stick, radius, invert, any object. Huh. I mean, I wanted those to shoot inside, and it just kind of isn't, and I'm not sure what to do about it. I mean, it's a fun little fountain thing, but these should be shooting off in different directions, for sure. Especially if I were to turn off the gravity, we should see that. Yeah, they should be going at an angle. I'm not sure what I'm missing there. Do I need to enable rotation and extended data? Do I? Use rotation? Well, that checkbox by itself didn't. Rotation mode, tangential. Let's say tangential. No. Up vector. I don't really care about that. I mean, that would be if we're outputting this. It needs to, like, that's just saying it has to track that. And if we say the particle direction is based on the normal, let's say this, maybe we have to change the orientation here. That's funky, but I would think it'd have to be Y or Z. But no, it just keeps on aiming upward. All right, so I don't want to. That's a little bit of a dead end. I don't want to get stuck on one of these random things just not quite working, especially when it's not a vital detail. It's definitely something I would want to figure out. But let's go ahead and we're going to go back to our emitter, and we're going to go ahead and offset it. I'm going to offset it -5, and we're going to go back to the emission speed and drop that way down, and hit play. And now hopefully they'll be kind of appearing inside the shape instead of outside of it. And you'll see that indeed it is generating a little bit more consistent of a trail and a line that is hopefully a little bit streaky. Now we do need this new one to be under editing. We need that to be spitting out points so that those can be referenced in our second shape. So let's go ahead and go to our emitter. Actually, let's go back and look at our geometry again. So let's go ahead and grab our volume builder and mesher, put it up at the top of the hierarchy. Let's go ahead and turn on the builder. We do not need that emitter, but we do. Actually, I'm going to hit undo because I want to see what radius. I had 7. So do not have that emitter, but yes, have this emitter. And let's make sure that the use mesh points is turned on and its radius can be 7 again. And indeed, we are getting the nice streaks going. So actually, let's drop that down to 6. Yeah, it still works. 5. Okay, 5 is actually working quite well. And if we turn on our builder, then we get our nice mesh. Let's go ahead and hide our particles. In fact, with everything turned on here, it makes me want to hide everything. So we'll hide our sphere. We will hide the original points, and we'll hide our new emitter. And now, at least it looks like we don't have a bunch of weird blobby points sticking out of the front. We are getting, this is interesting, I am getting a little bit of a refresh. You'll see that when I rewind, that there's still those points left behind. And it's a screen refresh. I don't think that would render, and you'll see that because when I move, let me show you. When I do that, and then if I rewind, you see it looks messed up. But without clicking anything else, if I just wiggle my mouse around, when it forces a viewport refresh, it'll pop away, which makes me think that that would not render. But in any case, let's see what we got. We got pretty good refresh here. We need stronger gravity, but let's see. These are going to get pulled over to the side, and we're getting pretty good there. If we make our gravity pretty dang strong, I'm going to make it 5 times as strong, times 5. Then the hope is, well, I guess those are taking a little while to go. I guess we could make it in an absolute sense, aim down. We could be shooting these particles out at the ground. So let's do that, because I guess this is a tiny advantage. If we couldn't do it the way we wanted to, an advantage is that we can tell this to indeed have speed, and I want the speed to be aiming straight down. So if we give this a speed of, I don't know, we don't want to go so fast that they escape the ground, which is important. So we'll do this. So these should be shooting upward. So if we tell the emitter to the controlling action, I'm going to tell it that it is relative. I'm going to grab the pitch. We're going to take the heading and spin it 180. And hopefully that makes it so these are actually shooting downward. Nope, still forward. Let's try this one, 180. Is this rotation just straight up not doing anything for us? That's weird. Relative source particle direction, rotation. I guess we... That's interesting. I wonder if there's a difference between particle rotation and particle direction. Once again, it's not something I want to explore right now because it's not what's important. Also, this initial blob, I guess we could ignore that first little part that was happening there. Oh, that's interesting. Look, it's actually, it is aiming the particles at a speed, and it's aiming them that way, which is interesting. Let's go ahead and drop this down to 180 again. Apparently that was doing something. Nope, you see it's still shooting that way. Okay, well, apparently there is some sort of direction here. 180. Actually, well, 180, if this was accurate, it should shoot the opposite direction. And it's still freaking firing that way. Why? Well, okay, so the rotation continues to be a pain in the butt. But let's just go ahead and get rid of the speed again. And they're all just getting created. The first few frames don't really matter because it's just about them going downward. We might need to extend the blobbiness of the sphere because the particles are emitting there, and we still see that on the surface, even though I think the smoothing would get rid of it. And once again, let's grab our gravity, which is indeed turned on, and we're going to make it even stronger. Let's say 10,000. So really strong gravity. There still might be that one initial frame where they're created, but these should be, I guess they don't have the speed right away. It's annoying me a little bit. And then there is, you see how these are kind of jiggly, so there's also that issue, which is probably to do with this mesh point radius, so we can say a little bit bigger, and that might chill those out a little bit. No, not so much, actually. The smoothing will go a long way to fix that, but I'm worried if we were seeing little bumps that there are still little bumps. They're just getting smoothed out. Smear. Yeah, I mean, it's all pretty interesting. Having said everything we have so far, though, I think I'm going to end pursuing this particular one in the particular vein because it goes down to specifics. We're hitting some roadblocks on it. But what I would like to do is I'm going to go ahead and give it a quick save. And I would like to see if we can do this without X particles. I'm going to save it as a different version. And let's see if we can do a simpler rig without any of this. So we're going to get rid of the X particles for this particular version. And no volume, yes, sphere. So here's the idea on this one, and we can turn our floor back on again. Hello, floor. So here's my thought. If we were to grab a Mograph Tracer, we can trace the sphere. If we're tracing the sphere, remember I said the big thing is I wanted all these points to be traced, and I'm going to do that, trace vertices. So now you can see each one has its own little line, and it's kind of continuous. And now the problem is I said I want all of my points to be falling to the ground, and we cannot have it do that. Well, in a way, we actually sort of can. If I were to create a FFD, I'm going to create an FFD and make it a child of the tracer object. We're going to go ahead and make this 1 point by 1, or I guess 2 by 2 by 2. And then we're going to move this up into the air far enough so it's catching every point that there would be. So that's exactly 150 units. And now if I were to take this and make it real big, let's say 3000 by 3000. So it's really big. If I grab all 4 of the top points, we could go ahead and pull this down and modify that mesh until, and I can pull this down to practically 300. I don't want to actually go to 300 because then it'd have a scale of 0 on the ground, which might be fine. But now you see all of those lines have been essentially parametrically squished just based on this deformer down to the ground. Now it's going to look weird the first few frames because the lines will automatically pair on the ground. But if we ignore that, now you see that we're actually just really easily getting those connected streaks the way I'd originally been saying I wanted to. So, boom, right away, we already have a much cleaner kind of workflow right there. And now, based on that, now if we were to turn our mesh back on again, we can just feed in, hopefully, our, in our builder, let's drag in our tracer. And I do indeed want this to be a union, and we have our nice control over our radius. And our density, and the density I almost always put up to 1. There's no reason not to subdivide it enough. That's cheap. It's cheap to get subdivisions there. It's expensive to get all the little blobs. But that looks pretty dang smooth there. I'm pretty happy with that. And then actually, oh, this might be interesting. You see we're getting, I like the way that the sphere blobs down, but that's almost, this is too many points for me. I don't want that many points being traced. So as an alternative, why don't we go ahead and try and create a matrix object? And honestly, I feel like with the introduction of R20, the matrix object has gotten so much more valuable. I use it a lot now. I'm going to change this to object mode, and we're going to clone onto our sphere. I guess we made it editable, so we'll just use the editable one. Why not? And it's cloning onto the surface, which is kind of what I want. I would like slightly better distribution here. I don't think we're necessarily going to get that. So we'll just leave it like this. I do want it on the very specific surface. How do I do that then? And those do stick, right? Yeah, those will stick. But there's no good, I mean, it's on the surface or it's on a polygon, and I don't want all of them. Although I guess we might be able to clone onto every single polygon center and then maybe turn some of them off. I'm not sure if that's a thing. Can we make some of them disappear via a effector? So I'm going to grab a, Let's do a shader. No, maybe random's better. If I do a random effector and I don't want to control the position, I want to control the visibility. Yeah, there we go. That is already better distribution. And will it maintain those? Yeah, it does. Oh, nice. Okay, cool. Working perfectly. So now the tracer should not be tracing the sphere. The tracer should be tracing the matrix object. I'm going to put these in order because I actually want the matrix object to calculate after the sphere, and I want the tracer to calculate after the matrix object. So now that that's happening, all those are getting traced. I don't need to see them. I just have the final trail. Let's go ahead and also hide our sphere. And let's see if we get our trail going. So the hope here is that we have fewer lines. Oh, look at that. Look at that. Oh, it's beautiful. I'm quite pleased with that. I'm quite pleased with that. So with that looking that way, we're getting these really nice streaks going behind it. In fact, let's just hit play and let this keep going. Now we are emitting more points on our tracer, but those won't create additional blobs here. I mean, it is potentially taking a little longer to calculate, but I don't think very much. Oh, that's working so well. Blur, and oh, we get these little streaks left behind. I mean, the only slight problem I have is that this is rolling a little bit like a ball, and it's not kind of clingy to the front. I'm not sure of a good way to get around that, but I am quite pleased with how that just worked. Now, let me think. Are there some other things we could do? Because I would kind of like this to be... Is there a way to make the back part of this be the smushed down part? Because here's the thing, is in the past, pre-R20, what you saw is what you get. But now we are able to feed these things into a volume builder, so we can really mess with some of the geometry on these shapes and get better results. So something I'm thinking right now, I don't know if this is a good idea, but it would be using another FFD. I can't think of a different tool that would do a better job, honestly, than the FFD. This is probably a silly waste of time because we don't need to get this detailed. But if we were to rewind this all the way, that's funny. Did the FFD do that? What the heck? It looks like something. I'm going to unhide it. Looks like some piece of my geometry went funky. This is why you never make changes, not at the time of 0, because now it's remembering that as the initial cache. And the only way to fix that is to undo a whole bunch of times until it like wakes itself up. And that could be significantly far back. Yeah, it's going way back. So we did just break our rig where it forgot what it was supposed to be doing. But luckily, we kept our reference sphere. So I can go ahead and turn on that one, and that becomes our main one. So let's go ahead and steal the relevant settings. So I want the new tag, all this stuff. I don't even think we need to make it editable, so that's kind of a bonus. We can delete our dead sphere. And now we can drag this into our builder and make sure our matrix object is cloning onto that sphere. So, yeah, that was a little bit weird, but it seems to be working fine now. So, yep, working fine, working fine. So now, here is a thought I have, well, let's just make sure it's still working. And then, this is something that bugs me a little bit, but if you turn off this FFD, it's still visible. So you have to actually hide that. But let's see what we're getting here. We got our sphere, we got that one, turn on, off, blah, 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 blah. Oh yeah, we have to make it editable for the, dang it, we do have to make it editable for the volume to see it. That's fine. Fix that, hit save, go. So now we let it go, and that's working fine. We're getting the really nice streak going. I love the way it leaves this trail behind, but I wonder if there's multiple things I'm thinking that we might be able to do. Think. I wonder if there's more field stuff. Here's I want to throw this out there. I've done a bunch of stuff with fields, but I haven't been able to use it very much lately. So I feel like I'm a little rusty on some of the field stuff, but a lot of it is so powerful, it's crazy. A thought I have is if we could leave a point. Ooh, that could work. Okay, this is gonna be weird. This is gonna be a weird one. I can't think of how to explain it except to start showing you, and I'll explain it as we're going. So I'm going to make a new cube. This might not work at all, but if it does, it's going to be cool. Let's go ahead and make a very brightly colored something earlier just so we can see it. So I'm going to make this on the cube, and we're going to hit T for scale on the cube, and cool. This is just so we can see it. So we got a cube. I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to make this I'm going to give it a constraint tag. So as a character tool, constraint tag, I want it to clamp. What do I want to clamp onto? I want it to clamp onto our dynamic sphere. Also, I should be making these changes at 0, 0, 0. So I want to clamp onto the sphere. How do I want to clamp to the sphere? I want it as not the origin, but to be stuck to the surface of it. I want the distance to be 0. So it has to be stuck to the surface, but it is free to move around. You see, I can move this, but you see how it's stuck on it? I can move it, but it's stuck. So what my hope is this becomes almost like a tail. This is something that lags behind it, and let's see if it works. So you see it's there, but as we roll forward, its inclination is going to stay behind it. Actually, well, surprisingly, it's moving forward. It's still stuck on the surface, but it's not being left behind. Okay, interesting. If I were to have put this in the back, I'm just curious if it will maintain. This is going to be a little tricky, but if we have it in the back and I roll forward, is it going to kind of stay back there? Yes, it does. You see, that's kind of what I want. I want something back there that's remembering, because we get this dynamic object, I want it always left behind as a tail. The problem here is when we change directions, it will eventually get left behind, but it won't be in the beginning, and I really want it to be left behind. So how do we make it stay behind it? Like, that's working really well right now. The mode should be, I guess we can give it a second thing to look at, but that's not going to pull it. Real quick, just gotta give a shout out. We've got Crossfader hanging out and old school Tokyo Megaplex, and Beeple's in here. What's going on, everybody? Thanks for coming in and hanging out. Now back to our show. So what I want, so this is not working great yet, but what my thought is if we were to essentially make a copy of that same thing we did with the FFD. So let's make this FFD, and we're going to make it 0 out. Let's go ahead back to model. We're going to 0 out all these funky rotations that were introduced. Let's go and set it to 2, 2, 2 again. Once again, we'll make it really big enough to trap the entire thing we're going to be doing. So we got a really big FFD sitting right on the ground, and then we make this a child. This is going to be interesting. We're going to make it a child of the sphere, but I don't want it moving around. So what I'm actually going to do is group it so I can get a null. I'm going to hit Alt-G on the FFD, so we have a null, and I'm going to rename this FFD null, and now we can pull this out. So now this is in the exact position that the FFD is. So if we were to right click on our FFD and add a character tag and add a constraint, then we can say lock it to the PSR, the position, scale, and rotation of the FFD null. So in spite of this object rolling around and being a child of the sphere, it should move with the sphere, but now it's not moving with the sphere anymore. Now it's kind of got this absolute position locked into the world. So you can see that, well, actually it is seemingly moving a little bit, but that's probably because Dynamics calculates really late. So it's trying to do it, but it has to calculate after it. So we'd have to actually go into Basic and change our expression to generator and increase this number to above 400, possibly above 450. The max is 499. You'll see if we drag that up, and we could just leave it there. And now you'll see if I play, it won't move. So it's about order of operations. So if you're not familiar with priority, this is the order of operations that Cinema will calculate things in. We only get access to this on a couple things. You'll see internally, first it does whatever initial is, and then it calculates animation, and it does things like espresso and code. Then it will run dynamics, and then it'll run the generators. So we have to run it after those things, and we can do that on things like tags. So now this is not moving. And now what my goal would be, although I don't know if this tail chasing it's going to work, but if we were to once again grab all 4 top points, we can take it and squish down our overall blob. Let me replay this before we actually do that. Oh, it looks like our geometry broke again. Why does that keep happening? So it's already just flattened pancake again. We're going to have to reset our sphere. A little frustrating. But just to show you, so essentially we would get that flattened thing, and I can take this and squish it down. So now essentially the whole thing's getting squished down, which is by itself okay. But now, because of fields, I just remembered, FFD does not give us fields. There is no fields option in FFD. Oh, why? Why would it do that to us? Come on, we were treating you so nicely. We can work around that. We're going to turn that off. And sorry, I don't know why. I must have made a change not at 0, or there's a bug why we lost our sphere. So once again, we still have our backup sphere just in case this kind of thing happens. So once again, we're just going to steal all of our tags. Boom. Make it editable. And then we have to go into the builder, feed in the new sphere. And we have to go to our matrix and feed in the new sphere. And we'll steal out the FFD, which we might use, but there we go. We should be back again. I'm going to save again. So yeah, all that's working fine. Cool. So having done all of that, oh yeah, so we want, once again, the whole point of what we're trying to do is squish down the back here. And we need something to do the deformation. What is going to be doing the deforming? And it pretty much has to be one of these deformers. Or it has to be one of our effectors. So I guess the effector would probably work, the plane effector. So if we make a plane effector and I tell it to deform our points, and then we can make it a child of the sphere. And the reason I left this, are we making changes not at 0 again? That might be what confuses it. Undo. Ah, it's flat again. Ah, did I just do that? Seriously? Wait, I saved it. I'm going to revert. File revert. Okay, we're back. Ah, geez Louise. I don't know if that's what's doing it. In fact, if we make those changes not at 0, that is really twitchy. I mean, it just really goes to show, do not make changes not at the time of 0, especially with dynamics, but especially with soft bodies. Anyway, we've got our sphere here, and the reason I kept this FFD is because I wanted to steal this tag off of it. So boom, our plane effector is now kind of this absolute position again. And we can move around this FFD, which is now the plane deformer. Whew. And now we can tell that plane deformer to be a deformer based on the points. And now if we were to change this, we should see this be blobbing around. Now it's actually kind of fun here. Why don't we turn off our volume stuff for a second and just look at the actual sphere. So what's cool is the way it's deforming is it's relative. So you see it's actually pushing the points upward and away based on its position. And if we were to move this up and down and whatnot, it's going to change. That's because the transform mode is in relative. And I think if I set that to absolute, actually absolute, it might be the transform space. So I'm going to set it to the effector space. There we go. So by setting it to the effector space, and I think we'll leave it on relative or whatever it was on, use reset to default. So yeah, relative. So now if I do this, you see it just moves up. Cool. That's really straightforward. But we're going to have to eyeball this a little bit. But now by adding a fall off, I'm going to add a linear fall off. We're going to change that linear fall off to be on Y+. We're going to make sure that the remapping is full, which is cool. That's actually something in R19 it was not defaulting to. But now you can see it's pretty much traveling from the ground up. That's probably way too big for what our final shape will be, but we're going to just leave it that way for now. And now you can see when we go to our plane effector, based on that fall off, if I start stretching this, the top is stretching a bunch and the bottom is not stretching barely at all. What that means is we can squish it down, and that means the bottom will not be affected very much, but the top will be affected quite a bit. So now the hope is if we hit play and we let that flop down to the ground, this plane effector is now behaving like our FFD was, but don't tell me turning that on and off is going to do the same effect. Okay, cool. We didn't lose it. Save again. Okay, so that is now blobbing it down. You'll see if I turn it off and we take a look, it blobs, but you see it's not that flat. But now if we turn that on, well, hopefully it's going to show it. Let's go ahead onto our plane and say squish. I guess it might be so far through the fall off we're not really seeing it. Let's pull this down more. Ooh, interesting. Like I was saying, the scale was too big, so let's try shrinking the linear field. That's about the relevant distance. And let's pull that back down again. But I am kind of not seeing the result of our plane effector squishing it down. See, look, as I change this, that is not updating. Do. Because I mean, somebody's saying that it only gets applied at the time of 0. But I mean, if it's not updating constantly, like if me moving the, oh, okay, well, actually, look, it is moving here. Blurp, blurp, blurp. So maybe it's very, very sensitive to what we're doing here. So make the time smaller and squish it down more. I mean, it's supposed to be absolute. This should be hella squishing it down. Yeah, you see, as I move it, it's not actually. What actually sort of is? I don't know. This is. I mean, it's. Whoa! Look at that. It is definitely behaving interestingly, but not in the way we want it to. If I want to move, I have to move my null. But you'll see, it's kind of like going absolutely nuts. It's actually pulling it below the ground at the time of 0, but I need it to be deforming it after the fact, and it's not. So that's another dead end. That is unfortunate, because we need something to manipulate it, because the plan was, I'm just going to go ahead and kill that because it's not doing it. The plan was that we were going to use like a vertex map transfer, or at least a spherical fall off based on this thing being stuck to it, and it was going to deform the back, so the tail of it was always squished down. And that'd be really cool. Oh, Ivan's in the chat too. Hi, Ivan. Since you changed your name to Ivan at best, I thought it said Ivana, and I thought maybe it was a different name, and I wasn't sure it was you. So sorry for that. But anyway, let's go and take a look at. I don't want to. We were making really good progress in here, and I don't want to get overly stumped. And I would kind of like to get to another question at least. Because we were having these really nice results with what we already had. Like, these streaks are looking really cool. Like, I'm quite pleased with that. So what we were trying to do is make it so the back half here would be squished down consistently instead of kind of being left behind. And that's just not... Every method we've tried, it appears to be some sort of limitation. But I am extraordinarily happy with the way these little paint streaks are being left behind. Like, that is looking great. And I do feel like there's probably some things we could do in addition to that, which would be some more of a fall off here. If we were to do more smoothing, that would go a long way, but I feel like that's going to obliterate our nice little tails here. And I guess it would look better if we did get that squishy down thing. So we're actually squishing down those dynamics. It would be working. It would also be working well. It would make that look better as well. But just for fun, if we were to grab our smoothing layer and continue to increase the smoothing. Actually, it does not... That does not help. I thought that would make this maybe transition a little bit more, but in this particular circumstance, that is not what it does. So instead, we just get the nice streaks, which is really... I mean, this is the part that I'm happy with. That was going to be the tough part. So now we're just in the little nuances. So we could end this one here. As far as tackling this part of the technical one... I would love to get this a little bit more controllable and sculptable. I'm going to have to think about it. I think we will wrap this one up here because I want to think about some methods. And we tried 2 methods, both of which I thought would work, and neither of them did, which is too bad. But I'll have to think about some other methodologies to tackle that. Because outside of deforming it... I mean, I guess another thing we could do, I had one more little idea popped in my head, and we could just use wind. So we still got this this cube, and this cube should, I mean, we didn't get it working perfectly, and we'd have to think about that some more. But let's go back to time of 0, by the way. If we put the cube and tell it to start looking at our dynamic sphere, and we'd have to keyframe it right now, I'm going to have to manually drag it back here every time. But if this is chasing behind it, which it should be doing an okay job of, we can make a Mograph, oh, not Mograph, sculpt, oop, back to time of 0. Move this in position. If we go and make a particle wind, so we've got a wind effector here, a wind simulation object, wind force. If we take this and we were to make this a child of our cube, and actually we can zero that out, and I'd probably move it up into the air a little bit. And then we add a, yeah, this would work pretty well if we can get chasing well. We can add a spherical field, and actually I'm quite pleased with that as well. So if we hit play, this should chase behind it, and if we make our fall off big enough, and we maybe move this down a little bit, we want this definitely intersecting with our blob, and we make our wind strong enough, so we'll jump that up to 55. Then the hope here is that, yeah, look, see, this is on the back, so this wind is blowing down on the back, which is keeping it in a lower position. So let's see how strong we can make this wind. So yeah, okay, whoa, that's pretty good. Whoa, look at that, it's pretty great. So it's actually squishing it so much that's not being acknowledged, and this is going to keep pulling behind. This wind is now relative, and it should be affecting it, and this is getting squished down. And actually, this is going to affect the entire simulation because it's actually forcing this back part into the ground more. So it's creating more friction. We could stop it from affecting the ones directly on the ground, but I don't necessarily think that would help. But it's doing something, which is more than what we were getting. Let's go ahead and experiment a little bit more because we're getting something. Now, I don't like this inner fall off. You see we have an inner one right here. In fact, we can visibly change it. If I grab this, I want that to be all the way in the inside so we always get a smooth transition. Let's let this go. Now it's going to be stuck in the front there. We can force this backward. We're going to have to like keyframe that to make it have a default position in the back. So we want this to constantly be blowing downward, to be squishing the back part. But just the way these soft bodies are reacting, I mean, it seems to sort of work. It's curious. It is a curious one. I'm going to shrink the overall spherical fall off just so it's a little bit more in the back. And I want to, could we make it stronger? I'm not sure how strong. I mean, 155 is pretty strong for wind. Let's go ahead and I'm going to jump it up to 555 just to see what happens, because why not? So you see it's on the front part here, and you see it's doing a great job of squishing that down. Now, if it was consistently doing that, I'd be quite pleased. But with the way this gets pushed through, it's like forcing it to like wrap over itself, and it loses its shape a little bit. So maybe what we need here actually is a little bit of, I guess I'm going to have to keyframe this because it's bugging me. So back here, I'm going to say, I don't even know if this is a good idea. If I were to record that, does it still play through? It's constantly trying to get, oh, that's interesting. It's constantly trying to get back to that back position, but it has to be stuck onto this shape. So it's constantly kind of pulling it back up there. That's actually not a bad thing, because that's keeping it in the back. And then we can actually change the keyframe to shift it over to the back over here. So that's actually pretty good. Yeah, I'm quite pleased with that, actually. Anyway, what I was getting at was, yeah. And then you see whenever you wind, it's actually in that correct position. So good stuff all around there. So with this going well, what I'm thinking is our blob, let's rename our sphere, blob. We can go to our dynamics, and under the forces, we can give this something like a little bit of pressure. So it actually does have a little bit of pressure, but if we give it a little bit more, well, we don't want it reinflating. I just don't want them folding over that much. But essentially with this wind forcing everything down, I feel like we might be able to put some decent flexion and shear back on it. And I'm going to crank up our damping just to keep, once again, those are draining energy out. So if this wind is blowing really strongly in the back all the time, then having it be a little stiffer is fine because this is compensating for it. Like the wind is going to be constantly pushing this part down. Now, I wonder if the little bit of, I'm going to go easier on the pressure and we'll dampen that more. And I thought 500 would be too strong for the wind, but based on the fall off, maybe it's not. And in fact, I mean, go big or go home. Let's go 5,000. And okay, clearly we can see it's having an effect. You see that 5,000 is going blurp and forcing the whole thing down, which is not bad. That's actually kind of cool. Look, we're getting a transition. But my worry would be that the friction is going to be so strong on the ground that it's going to like completely murder it. Having said that, I got another idea, which is if we were to put a second fall off here. So if we were to make a wind fall off, and man, look at all the R20 features we're using already on this first episode. I knew R20 would be great for live streams. So if we make a linear field and we set this to Y plus, apparently our cube is rotated, so Y plus is not the orientation we need. Let's try Z plus. Cool. Z plus actually is heading downward. Weird. So say a Z minus. So what I'm going to do is set this length way down. And then I don't think this cube can go lower than that. So that becomes our low point. So I'm going to put this here. So what this is saying is only geometry above that point should be affected. And everything below that shouldn't. So this wind shouldn't be forcing anything below this point hard into the ground. And now if we go into our wind and we make sure that these two, this is multiplying on top of it, that might do a good job of chilling the whole thing out. So let's see what happens. Now it hasn't gotten forced down yet because this hasn't gotten squished down, but now it is. So now it's getting squished down in the back, but it's working pretty well. It's pretty good. Look at that. Look at that. I'm pretty pleased with that. This is actually, I might have to break this out in the proper tutorial for not this paint thing specifically, but because I'm working on this advanced dynamics tutorial series, and this is advanced dynamic stuff. Like this is making dynamics controllable. So that's going to travel around. Now, once again, actually, this is working well. I'm quite pleased. So why don't we go and do a couple extra keyframes here. So at the beginning, actually, at the beginning, this first keyframe doesn't have to be way over here. The first one could be down more. So that will be the initial keyframe position. So when we hit play, it's going to go down. And even here, I'm going to say, okay, cool, that's there. But now I want you keyframed here. So now it's constantly trying to get back there, but it has to be where the sphere is. So now it's going to get squished forward. Good, good. Still stuck to it. Actually, it pushed it pushed it down so hard that the cube could not drag it along. So based on the things that we've modified here, I'm going to go easier on the friction. So let's go ahead and I like moving the tag here because now I can grab multiple tags simultaneously. So I want lots of friction on the cube. What I'm going to do is change actually the friction on the floor. Let's give it 25% of its current friction. So it's going to be 100% friction, 100% friction. So this is really pulling it along, but the floor should let it slide a little bit. So let's see if that does anything for us. So this should be squishing along. Let's see if it actually, yeah, it's moving better now. In fact, it's moving a lot. It's kind of stuck to the cube, so we don't necessarily have to be that harsh on it, or we could make that less friction, or we could once again increase the friction on the floor. But the point being is that did work, and now we have a parameter that's very controllable. Now, normally the wind would be kind of soft enough, like there'd be such a softness to it that I wouldn't be worried. But you'll see actually as this is getting squished along that our cube starts twitching up and down a little. You see it's kind of popping up and down, and because our wind is so strong, it's actually reactive to whatever that's doing. But that worked. Well, I guess we need to kind of split that difference because it slid, but it didn't go quite as far as I wanted it to. You see how it's kind of like, as this twitches around, it actually is reactive to that, which is interesting, but there is something we could do to fix that as well, and it's going to make the rig even a little bit more advanced. And because everything's working, I'm quite pleased to continue moving with it. But you see, that is doing a great job of being squished down and looking the way I want that to. Okay, so like I said, this is twitching around, and I don't want it snapping around like that. So what we can do here is instead of having this cube, which is just a way of us visibly being able to tell what's going on, what I'm going to do is make a, I guess it could be, it's going to be, I'm actually going to just make a copy of this, copy and paste, so it's the same setup, but delete the second wind. And on this one, let's go and make a new material, and we'll just make this one a yellowish color. And with this cube, I'm going to hit T for scale, but then make it a little taller so you can see it poking out the top. So there we go. So now we can just see those two cubes are like what they're supposed to be doing. So this new top cube is going to be the one that's like really stuck. It's really trying to stick in those back positions. And it's even got those keyframes on it. But now the second cube, I'm going to say, no, you're not a clamped cube. So we can go back to the basic tab. You're not clamped, you're a spring. So you're springy. So now I want to spring to the position of the target, and the target's going to be cube 2. And now it's constantly trying to get there. But what we can do is add some drag. So I'm going to add 25% drag and pretty weak stiffness to it. So now the hope would be is we're going to see, and even now, actually, we might need to delete the keyframe off of there. Okay, apparently that's a variable. But you'll see how This is trying to spring over to that one. So this one is moving, and that one's kind of getting, that's the twitchy one, and then this one's lagging behind it. And all those little twitches and movements, the spring is absorbing them and eating them so that we don't actually have to worry about it. And actually just did a really great job of streaking the second time. So you see that that one's actually stuck really well. So let's grab that. We're now recording keyframes on Cube 2. We should probably rename these. But you'll see that this is stuck behind it, which is exactly what I want. So right around, yeah, I want to stay where it is. Like that is where the cube told it to streak to. So I'm going to keep this here. It's got a little bit of drift, but I'm fine with that. And then we let this play some more. And then starting right when it hits it again, I'm going to hit pause it. Let's record its position. So we're saying, yes, you want to be there. But then over the course of this next important few frames like that, I want this to have shifted to be trying to get over to this position. So we'll record that. So now we've moved the tail from being over trying to get back to here to try and get back to essentially here. So we hit play, and now the squished part should be in the back. It's shifted the squished part to the back over here. So now we've got our nice little blob of paint. Let's go ahead and take a look at this like this. Let's hide this one. In fact, we can, let's just call this tail, or we'll call it sphere tail. And then we'll call this one smooth tail, so that we know those are what's chasing it. And now we can hide the visibility of that. So we can just kind of look at our final shape here. And let's go ahead and do a little bit of cleanup on the smoothing here, and then we will wrap this one up. So we can go to our mesh builder, and we can just manipulate the way these look a little bit. We could crank up our strength here and make that look a little bit smoother. But of course, if we go too far, we're going to lose like its kind of fidelity. So we can do that a little bit. Of course, we could increase our voxel size, or rather decrease it and make it more detailed. So you see that becomes a little sharper. In fact, I kind of like these little ridgy details. So that might be okay. In fact, I don't think we're going to do this. No, I changed my mind. We are going to do this. So one cool thing we saw in the reference, I'm not going to pop it back open again, but one thing that we saw in the reference was that there was kind of like a little more life to these trails. It wasn't just like the slime trail. There was a little bit of life to it. So something we might be able to do here is I'm going to grab this matrix object, and I'm going to, right now it's cloning onto the spheres. Let's rewind all the way. Right now, this matrix object is cloning, and you can see it's cloning a whole bunch of them. I'm going to tell it to clone less, and it's going to clone less by the random effector. Remember, this is essentially just erasing those out. So if we go into our min-max, I could start pulling down our max, and we're going to get fewer and fewer. So I just want to get rid of about half of them. And now I'm going to copy and paste our matrix again. So we got an entirely new matrix, an entirely new copy. We'll just rename it number 2. And we'll rename it random 2 just to kind of keep track of them. And here I'm going to change the random seed. So now there's different lines on it. So awesome. That's working quite well. Now this tracer is currently tracing matrix 1, which we'll just rename matrix 1 and random 1. So if we were to tell a copy and paste of the tracer, we now have 2 tracers. And the second tracer is going to trace matrix 2 instead of matrix 1. But what's going to be cool about the second tracer is we're going to tell it to, we're going to grab its FFD, which is squishing it all down. And I'm going to unhide that FFD so we can see it. And if I were to grab its points and pull it up in the air a little, we are now not squishing that one down quite as far. So now we have half of the lines are down low, and half of the lines should be a little bit higher. And we're not going to be able to tell exactly how high they are until we let this play out a little bit. I just want to visibly see it. And actually, you can see how these lines are pretty dang far up in the air. So this is a subtle thing we need to do. We're going to pull those back down. We might need to ignore the first couple points of it. We'll just have to see. But we, of course, also need to go into our volume builder and drag in our, let's call it tracer 2. We'll also put it in the second position just because it's 1 and then 2, 1 and then 2. Inside of our volume builder, let's put tracer 2. And it is, again, a union of these, and let's just give it the same rule. So I want a 7.5 radius and a density of 1. So now you can see that we've got some lines that are a little bit higher up in the air. I'm actually going to let this play through a little bit further so we can see the streaks a little bit better. Blurb. blobs, 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 blobs. I wish we hadn't made this go so far over. I don't want to re-keyframe everything, so we're... And then there's some stiffness stuff we might want to change on here so it doesn't look quite as much like it's breathing. Of course, if we were streaking it around more, that'd probably be working pretty well. Also be working pretty well. Yeah, it just didn't catch the... I'm not sure why the dynamics didn't catch, but we can distinctly see that we've got some more prominent streaks up in the air. So the only thing I can do is rewind, hit play, and hope the... hope this catches and drags it further. Come on, drag it. Oh, that's doing such a nice job. It's still not dragging it that far. I'm not sure what changed about it. I mean, honestly, I was even thinking that it would probably be a good idea to even keyframe this blob so we can make it move more, putting a tractor on the cube. There's a million ways we could add some additional controls onto our blob to be having it be more art directable, because trusting a cube to scrape it along the ground is a very imprecise way of controlling it, and so I don't like that. I just decreased the friction on the ground, and it's probably gonna drag it way too far now. But all I really wanted to see is if these streaks were streaking the way I wanted them to, and it's looking pretty good. Like we got some definite more definition going on. And what's cool is like how much of this is parametric. So we could go ahead in those matrices, or specifically the random effectors, and crank it up and make more of them or make less of them. If we made more of them, then we could shrink all the streaks down more. Well, let's see. Okay, it's been working okay. But yeah, okay, now we're getting these nice lines being left. We can just see if they're up in the air a little bit too much or not. I'm not unhappy with it. I think I'd probably want a few more lines to make it be a little more consistent. But actually, even as this is getting streaked across the ground, it's working pretty well. Look at these nice blobs we're getting. All of the smoothing out and everything just is going to go straight into the volume builder. We got a pretty nice little layout there. So we got our basic smooth layer. We could crank that up, but I'm going to turn that off and let's add an entirely different shape layer. And this shape layer, we don't want to obliterate it, but let's change it to something like the mean curvature. And this one, yeah, you can see how it's kind of got all these little like little angry tick marks. But if we crank that up, it actually makes those quite a bit cleaner. So that's a mean curvature is one that I often go to. And then a lot of the other ones I just end up playing with, like Laplacian flow. We can give it multiple iterations, and actually, yeah, 2 or 3 iterations on that, and you see it's become quite smooth. Once again, it's probably going to slow down our calculations quite a bit. We can turn on the other smoothing, and that's going to make these a little bit more streaky if we wanted to. And then always keep in mind you can go and create a smoothing deformer, and you can put this as a child of the mesher, and then this becomes a kind of an after the fact one. So here's the result we're currently getting. And you'll see as I drag it, you see, even though what our smoothing did, it did a good job, we still have these lumps. But if I grab this and start pulling it in, it's going to way smooth that out. So you can go overboard, but yeah, we can smooth that out a bit like that. And these get a little more melty. But the more we smooth it, the more we're losing our individual lines. So those just become those become like artistic controls. Like, do you want to do that or do you not want to do that? And then even this, like we have 3 layers of Laplacian, but we can go and put that down to 1. And then we have a little bit more of the definition, and the smoothing is helping counter that. And these become a little bit more round. Just completely controls that we have to control it. Now, let's see. We spent almost an hour and a half on just this one. So maybe we'll just do a couple quick Q&As in the chat if you guys have it. I don't know if we'll have time for another question. But that is doing a great job. And now here's something I kind of want to point out is that something that is really, really fun and exciting to me is with the new R20 stuff, it has made it so that we are able to art direct things more. Well, and how do I say this? Before we were trying to run a particle simulation to make this happen. But instead of making a particle simulation, we were able to make a new version where we are controlling it directly with matrix objects and the tracer and deformers, so that now we're less dependent on simulation. We've built a rig. We've built out something that we have so much more direct control over. And if there's something we don't like, it's easier to make a change there. Simulations are very hard to control. And I mean, we are seeing some difficulty of controlling this simulation. But I bet you that we could probably modify this so that this wouldn't even have to be necessarily a dynamic object. We could just be controlling it via deformers entirely. And even here, you see we're getting a very different thing where it was stuck to the cube and it got dragged one way and then dragged the other. So as soon as we have a simulation we like the look of, we'd have to kind of freeze it and bake it down. But this is doing such a good job of like dragging across and making these streaks. And I just would have no idea how to make this outside of it. And even the fact that we were able to tinker around and play and feed these things in is so fun and intriguing. Like, it's so cool that we've got these shapes. Like, look at this blob dragging across. And given the setup that we have here, we've even potentially got a little bit. We're not using. We could use X particles, and we were, but because we're now feeding this two different types of tracer objects, there's even a small chance that we could get some varied color on it. This might not work too well, but just for fun, if I were to, in the color channel, let's go ahead and feed a proximal. And the proximal, I'm going to feed one of the tracer objects, and I'm going to tell it to see the vertices and possibly the edges. And then let's just hit render on that. Of course, you can only see this at render time. And let me go ahead and save it since we had good stuff going. I can hit render. And okay, not seeing much. It's entirely white. But let's grab our end distance and drop this down to 10. There we go. Okay, so now, because of the way that these tracer objects are being created, I'm now creating a proximal that's kind of cloning itself onto all the points of that. And now you'll see that this tracer object doesn't have quite enough points to make that look smooth. But if we were to go to tracer, which is the one I fed it, if we go to tracer and I tell it to have some intermediate points, and I'll say natural 1. So that should just be doubling the number of points. And yeah, right away you see, boom, double the number of points inside there. So if I were to increase my end distance here to 15, so it's a little bit bigger. So now you can see that we've got some white streaks in there. And now I can go to blend mode, and I can say lighten, and lighten is better than add because it actually no, I thought it was lighten. It might be lighten, but we should change this to smooth. I guess add was working way better. I guess that's blowing it out. I think that it is lighten that we want, but we might need a slightly bigger radius, and let's give it a sub radius as well. And then we might need more subdivisions. I'm not sure. It takes longer and longer to calculate the more you add. I don't know. I could have sworn it was lighten that I liked better, but add does seem to give better results right now. So you can see that, like, look, we've now got it so some of these streaks are white and some are black. And by taking that and feeding that through a colorizer, then that will become different paint colors. So let's go ahead and add in some nice orange. And then we can add in some... I don't know, let's get some nice dark blue, drag this over. So now when we render, we've actually got these different colors streaking across. I mean, it looks a little blatant right now because wherever that line crosses over, it's going to go. But the point being is we actually have the ability to do a little bit of that. I think X particles would probably do a little bit better job of us being able to control that. But just that the option is working there at all in vanilla cinema. Like, we are only using vanilla cinema 4D here. That is pretty cool. I'm just going to go back to our original color here. Oops, which one was it? I lost it. There we go. Back to our green. I like the green. But I am quite pleased with that overall. Like, we get this depth in there. We get the streak. It's a nice dynamic, controllable rig. We're able to get various different parts of it working. So yes, very, very pleased with that. So let's go ahead and give that a quick save. And there's definitely some cool things for me to keep in mind there for possibly even my NAB presentation. But I'm going to go ahead and jump back on over here, and let's click on our cam and chat window. Ooh, and I even remembered some of the chat, although these might be from earlier. So I'm pulling the chat up here to see what you guys have been saying. Sorry, there's always a struggle. Man, this blinking is driving me absolutely nuts. I'm going to fix that for next show, I promise. Maybe if I don't touch anything. Nope, still blinking. Yeah, I should have left the frame rate down at 30. But yeah, sorry. It's difficult. There's like a challenge between interacting with the audience and then just making content. And at some point, maybe this could get pulled out and uploaded as a standalone video if it was like really good. But then the ones that are really cool techniques, and I feel like something like this could be refined more and more and more and become a real tutorial. So there's different ways of formatting, but I don't want to keep on interrupting. Especially with Rocket Lasso right now. One of the ideas is it's Patreon supported. Like right now, especially until any tools get made, like that's going to be my primary source of income for making these kind of tutorials and live streams. And along those lines, a lot of people, when they do live streams, it's like, oh, big shout out to Ivan. Thanks for donating $15. I don't want to do that. I want it to be the content and we go, but then have other moments where we can interact with the stream. So I'm going to try and keep that a little bit cleaner. Oh yeah, it's Magda's birthday. Actually, a couple different things. We got to cover a couple different details. So first of all, happy birthday, Magda. Uh, Magda is one of the long-term members inside of the Slack channel. Now, we had the Slack channel that used to be a show that kind of continued off of my old live show, but now, oh my God, this blinking is going to drive me nuts. I'm going to give you guys like a headache. I'm going to put the screen back on. I'll be tiny over here while I'm talking. And maybe one of the cables got loose or something. I don't know. Stop it, camera. Anyway, actually, did that actually help? I don't know. If it keeps blinking, I'll go back to that screen. But anyway, sorry. The Slack channel. So we had a Slack channel. It used to be existing for the old show, but now it's become the official it's become the official Slack of Rocket Lasso. So it's going to continue, and it's going to be really independent, and it's going to be community based. And like Lucas has been running it, and we got Scott in there and Petru, and they all help moderate it and run it, and they have really great projects and whatnot. And Lucas, actually, if you could put a link for people to be able to go and jump in there, I don't have it handy. And actually, giving the camera, I think the cord was a little loose, and now it's not going nuts. So okay, cool. If it ain't broke, wiggle the cord, the cable. So, sorry, a lot of things going on. Thoughts are scrambled. I'm really excited. Like, things are really cool. I'm also really happy that piece was going really well. So, there's a Slack channel, and everybody should come and join. So, actually, Sean just put the link in the chat. So, everybody make sure that you go in and join, continue the conversation. Like, lots of really helpful people. It's a really great community. Everybody's in there to help and to learn. And there's really cool contests that happen, and chain projects, and sketching days and whatnot. There's lots of really fun activities going on. And I want to be more and more involved in some of the stuff and promote some of the good ones, especially as the website comes online. So... yeah, working at a shorter URL. That's all good. Yeah, even right now, my current YouTube URL, I can't get the name yet until I have 1,000 subscribers. So I'm going to need a nice. It's way too long, so I'm not linking to YouTube yet. But I got to do the one little thing here at the end while you guys are here is that this, like I said, the live stream and tutorials are going to be entirely Patreon supported. Right now, I'm losing money running electricity and internet and equipment and paying for software and the streaming ability. All these things are costing money, and I need to try and live off of this for a little while. So, as a quick thing, if you guys can, jump on over to Patreon/Rocket Lasso. You can find it on rocketlasso.com. And I've already got a bunch of tiers set up, and this is completely optional. All the stuff is going to end up being free for everybody. So you're not missing out if you don't give any money. So don't worry about that. But I do want to make it so that I'm able to keep up with the tiers, but also people can get some stuff. So I just want to go over some of the tiers really quick. And I super appreciate anybody who helps out. But if you can't or you don't, then that's completely fine too. There's tons of content that I follow that I do not support, and there's other content I follow that I do support. So it's super cool. So we'll just rush through these real quick and see if anything sounds interesting to anybody. But we got the basic one, which is just a quick $2 a month. And that's just to like support me a little bit. Next up is the Cowpoke tier, which is you get early access to the videos before they're posted on YouTube. I'm thinking there's probably going to be like I post them on Patreon on like a Thursday, and then they go live on the next Tuesday is potentially the schedule. And that includes stuff like the replay of this episode going up on YouTube, things like that. Next up is the Technician tier, and the goal here, and I have to start talking to people as we get more people in this tier, is going to be that there's going to be a second bonus live stream. There's going to be a special live stream, I think every week, possibly every other week. It depends on the schedule. And it's going to be project based. So instead of kind of taking random questions from the audience, it's going to be like, hey, let's make a project from scratch and work on it week to week to week, and however long it takes. So it might be like a 5-episode thing, like one or two. I don't know if it's going to be a 1-hour show or a 2-hour show yet. But let's say on like Friday afternoons or Thursday evenings, and it's kind of like whatever time works for me and works for a majority of the people who want to participate, where I'll have polls up and then the poll can go out there and the people vote on which project that I'm going to pursue. I'm going to make sure that, and then take ideas, but it has to be something I'm interested in. Otherwise, I don't want to work on it. But it'll be just fun projects to run through and get kind of a fun final video. And all those live streams will just be for people at the $10 or more tier. But then the final result, like the final animation and then maybe cool tutorials that come out from that, those will end up being free for everybody because I want like lots of cool open community stuff going. And then there's the next up is the engineer tier, which is you get all of these scene files. So the scene files I was just saving in this show, you would get all of those. So I will be zipping these up and giving them out to all the $20 Patreon, what do you call them? Patrons, I guess? Yeah. To the patrons. And then, of course, you get all the previous benefits. Next up is in the control room. So this is you really like Rocket Lasso. And then I will start having a credit screen of everybody who supports at this level. And then I have a plan of having a bunch of guests on the stream. And some of the guests I've already chatted with are in the chat or were in the chat at some point. And the plan is to get them on and we're going to be doing these cool projects together. But then prior to that, I want to record like a little interview with them. So in this one, you would not only get your name in the credits, but you'll find out about the guests extra early and be able to submit questions that, as long as it's a good question, then I will be asking them as part of the show, and you'll get access to those interviews early. And all previous benefits. And then going up to the bigger ones, which are like, you just got to put the big fish ones in there in case somebody really wants to help out. So I have no expectations anybody actually does these, but we have the Among the Stars one. So I get to have a bunch of cool cowboy puns and rocket puns, which is fun. But this is a shout out by name at the end of the stream. So kind of like in the post-credit scene, like right now, I'd be giving you a big shout out and you get all of the, you get your name in the credits and then the final one. And then all the previous tiers is what I mean. And then finally is the Rocket Wrangler. So this is pretty much designed for a studio or somebody who's making a lot of money doing this kind of stuff. And the idea here is if a tutorial I made or if something I answer in the live stream or in a video is incredibly helpful to you and you make a whole bunch of money off of it and you're doing fine, then this is a way of getting like some primary, like a big shout out, your company's name. I'd put your link in the show description of your company. It's just like, hey, something I did was really valuable to you and you want to really support in a big way. So those are all the tiers. If anybody can help out in any of these ways, and it's just going to help me out. Once again, you can get to the link just by going to the Rocket Lasso Patreon or go to rocketlasso.com. You'll see the link. But once again, super important to emphasize that I want this all to be, I want all of the final content to be free for everybody. So I just want to make this stuff big and open and lots of fun sharing. And honestly, the Cinema 4D's got the Cinema 4D community and the motion graphics community has gotten really big. There's been some interesting directions things have gone. There's been some frustrating directions things have gone. But there's a lot of people making really cool content. The quality of the content is like skyrocketed, which is super cool. But, my area of expertise has always been more the technical end of things and not the making things look pretty. Having said that, I have goals and a list of 1,000 things that I want to be doing. But, I'm going to be spending time in third-party renderers. I'm going to be learning some of the new systems and things I don't usually spend time in. And then also, hopefully, when I have some guests on, they're going to be able to fill in some of the gaps where we can make things, finalize things, and make them look more pretty. Is definitely a big goal of where things are going. But anyway, that kind of covers the basics of the Patreon thing. And I already talked about that. I hope to eventually be making some tools. They'll probably be in Cinema 4D because it's my area of expertise, obviously. I will be going to NAB, which is going to be super fun. I'm going to be talking about excuse me. I'm going to be talking about advanced dynamics techniques, but it's going to be kind of a highlight reel of a whole series of tutorials I'm going to be working on for advanced dynamics. I feel like I'm one of the most qualified people to talk about this topic, so I'm really excited to really get in there and make your dynamics art directable, which is just super fun. But I'm going to jump into the Slack and check this out. It seems like a vast majority of people are hanging out on Twitch, which is cool. Anybody who is on Twitch, I would appreciate if you hop over to YouTube and just subscribe so we can get those numbers up so that I can register the name properly and unlock some of the other features. So yeah, that's also, oh yeah, you just search Rocket Lasso and you'll find it on YouTube as I get these videos up. In fact, I think this will be the first official video going up on the YouTube. There are so many things I have up in the air and conversations I've been having with people. Sage of Shadow, by the way, I was trying to message you like a month ago and I could not for the life of me get a hold of you. But let's see, everybody who's been hanging out. Oh yeah, put some links in here. First of all, let me get a link to here's a link to the straight up Patreon. And then Epic, thank you for linking to the YouTube. So yeah, follow on YouTube would be great. Also, I mean, it's at Rocket Lasso on Twitter, Rocket Lasso on Instagram, there's a Rocket Lasso Facebook page. There's just not a ton of content filling it up right now, but you know, this today is day one of getting that content going, and I'm really excited to see where some of these things go. So thank you so much, everybody. Let's see if there's any questions I can answer. Anyone? Also, be sure to join the Slack. So we got lots of cool things all tying in together there. There will be when the more official version of the website comes up, there's going to be an official community tab where community projects get posted and access to the community Slack is going to be there. That's going to be really cool. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out. Jake, thanks for making it in. Sage, of course. Big Green Mug, what's going on? Ivan, thanks as always. I hope and Crossfader, hopefully the stream went well. This new software that was once again recommended to me from the Mograph guys has been working really well, so much better than OBS, and I really liked OBS. But yeah, it's streaming to multiple platforms same time, no problems except for having to plug that camera in a little bit tighter. Yada Glow, thanks for hanging out. Gumbo, Simon, Floyd. Oh, it's Freud, not Floyd. Nate. So yeah, thanks everybody and for asking questions. Because we ended up doing a bigger, longer question today, next week we'll try and do a series of smaller, shorter ones. So if I didn't get to answer you, then go ahead and save it for next week and hopefully we can tackle it. That will be exciting. Beeple, thanks for hanging out, especially if you're still around. Appreciate it. Be seeing you at NAB. Do some partying. Anybody, by the way, anybody who's going to NAB, make sure you sign up for that one community party. I tweeted it out like yesterday, so make sure you sign up for that because it is the most fun party that I've been to at NAB, and it's all this community, so it's super cool. School of Motion and Grayscale Gorilla and Maxon and some After Effects people and the future. Lots of people. A lot of names you know will be there, so that'd be super cool. Looking forward to that. Scrolling way up through the chat, seeing what's going on. Yeah, making it to NAB is great. I don't even know how many NABs I've been to. Do you see all those? Oh, actually, I guess those were more from Mograph. But yeah, I've been to like 20 NABs now. It's ridiculous. But yes, once again, to all of you, thank you so much for supporting my new endeavor here. It's this big, giant experiment. We'll see if it works. But I'm super excited to be able to double down on all the stuff that I love about Cinema 4D and this community, and that's all going to be great. There's just so many plans I can't even start to go into them, and I don't want to tease anything that I don't have locked in. That's always a dangerous game to play. So let's see. Thank you, Samuel. Andy. Oh, Andy, thanks for making it, man. We got to hang out again. Epic J. Yeah, watching for tutorials for 6 years. Yeah, the amount of hours of my voice recorded online is pretty ridiculous. If you told me that 20 years ago, I never in a million years would have believed you. But here we are. Polygon Addict. Polygon Addict. Nice. Polygon Addict. So yeah, thanks everybody. We will wrap this one up. Actually, I guess we're almost directly on time. We might have been able to squeeze one more in, but there was a lot of information I want to cover. So once again, thanks everybody. Keep an eye out on the social media platforms for some quick tips I got coming out, as well as hopefully some longer form tutorials. Although right now I need to I need to focus on my NAB presentation. That is always a slightly stressful bit of time, but I'm looking forward to it, and it's always a good trip. So we we're going to wrap it up here. Thank you so much, everybody. I'll see you in the Slack channel. I'll see you back here in a week. And we'll probably get a open channel going either on Patreon or on the Slack channel for the people in the $10 threshold, so that we can start talking about what project I'm going to focus on, so we can do a big deep dive, like, you know, like I'm saying, like 6-hour long project, 10-hour long project of bigger things. And you get to see me fumble through every step of the way. So that will be fun. And I want to have people like really participating in that. And of course, it's fun to give out those scene files to people. So it's like, hey, if you're working on a project with some paint thing and you want to reverse engineer the paint file we have here, then there's the tier for that too. I will wrap this up. Chris H, thanks for hanging out. 3D Duff, of course. Okay, we're officially wrapping this one up. I think we have a successful first episode. Thank you so much, guys, and I will see you in a week. Here, I'm going to switch to the screen so we can hear the nice little exit music, and then bye-bye.